Hi guys, and welcome to my showcase and tutorial for Skilltree Items Pro. Skilltree Items Pro is a plugin that allows you to create a large number of custom items using currently 4 different categories, but that list will adjust as I work further on the plugin, sort of expanding the functionality from the original free version. So there are 4 primary types of categories. Let me just create some items here. There are XP items, which you can see here. We've got XP items with various, obviously, XP ranges. When you consume these items, they're going to give you a random amount of XP. Between the values, so 2,000 to 4,000 gave me 3,500. Yep. We've got the skill point items, which is again, you can have any number of these with any number of variations from any number of loot sources. So if you wanted to have some higher tier ones from higher tier loot, including event plugins and that sort of thing, you can add this to the loot tables there. We also have the new one, which is XP boosting. So this one will give you temporary increases for XP boosting, and you can make it XP source specific. Such, for example, this one here is called the Geologist's Flask. Gives you between a 50 to 100% XP bonus for basically completing the hit on a mining node. So every time you finish a mining node, you're going to get a 50 to 100% XP boost for that particular XP drop. Same thing for the tree hit final, skin hit final, killing a scientist, breaking a barrel, fish caught, that sort of thing. Over here you can see there's the duration of the buff, how long it will last for. This is about an hour, I believe. This one here is 2 hours. There's also some additional things you can add on there, such as time frames. So for example, the default midnight oil item will give 50% bonus to all sources for an hour, but is only valid, it'll only function between 8 PM and 6 AM in rust time. So it's obviously a nighttime bonus. There's also biome specific bonuses as well. So for example, if you want the Arctic biome, if you only want players to be able to get XP in a specific biome, such as the Arctic biome or the jungle biome or whatever, you can add biome parameters on there as well. And you can tie all these parameters together specifically. So if you want them to only be able to get 200% XP in the Arctic biome at nighttime, then you can go right ahead and do that. And yeah, we've also got the last one, which is probably the most exciting one, which is the where is it? Here it is. Yep, the temp buffs. So these are actually buffs that get added into the skill tree as a temporary buff. So for instance, I currently have no buffs. If I wanted to consume the vehicle mechanic buff, unwrap that, gets added for a temporary period of time. I now have the vehicle mechanic buff, which is this one. So it allows me to repair my car instantaneously. Now down here you can see when I've consumed the buff, it gets added to a timer. So I can see vehicle mechanic buff is valid for an hour. I can add additional boosts and buffs and everything else to it as well, and you can see it kind of increases. You can even do the ultimates from Skilltree as well. So for example, the raiding ultimate unlocks for 90 seconds. You can see it's starting to tick down there. If I go into my Skilltree, I can see that I actually have the raiding ultimate enabled. I can do /strike. This one actually requires me to have the rockets in my inventory. Choose a target. Start marking the target. And it's as though I have unlocked the actual buff itself. It even has the cooldown as well, so I can't use basically with the parameters I've set, I can only use it once, and then the timer will expire. So what happens here is if you have the menu open, it'll actually tick down the menus as well. You can press anywhere to close it. You can also move this icon as well. So if I go stip.move icon, I can drag this to whatever part of the screen I'd like to have it display, and eventually this buff will time out and it'll play a sound. So the ones I've added by default are the deep sea looter, the double explosion chance, the extra fish, Mining Luck, Instant Chop, and Instant Smelt on Mine. But you can realistically add any skills you like from skill tree in item form, and these will stack with existing skills. So for example, if the player has 100% bonus on mining from the skill tree, they consume a buff that gives them mining yield plus 100%, it will stack their bonuses to 200%. If I go and check the skill tree menu now, you can see that the buff has disappeared. And these are on reload as well. So when the plugin reloads, all buffs are cleared. So there are instants while the plugin is running. So there won't be any sort of remaining buffs and whatever if the server crashes or whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I plan on adding a few more variations and categories as sort of ideas come. One I'm toying around with at the moment is the idea of adding a respec option. So when you consume an item, it gives you a free respec. So, but anyway, we'll jump into the configuration side of it and show you how to set it all up and how customizable it really is. Alright, so jumping into the configuration side of the plugin, we'll take it line by line and I'll explain as best I can basically what everything is and how it all works. So game manager settings, how often should the game check the manager for expiries and UI updates? Basically we've just got the UI updates and the expiries and stuff checking once per second. It's fairly low overhead, so it shouldn't have much impact on your server at all. It's not really necessary to lower it more than that, so it just means that yeah, when they the timer ticks down sort of slow, like relatively slowly on the UI. Sound settings, so sounds that plays here when they successfully consume an item, active buff ends, and when they fail to consume an item. So for example, I've put in logic, so if they try to consume a buff that's lesser value, for instance, if you have an item that gives them plus 50% bonus XP to mining yield, and then they try to consume a plus 40%, it'll come back saying no, you've already got a better buff active. If they've had the 40 and then consume the 50, it will override it and reset the time based on whatever the duration of the 50 is set to. The item settings is basically where you can create any number of custom items. So yeah, there is no limitation on how many of these you have, and you can basically, which we'll get to shortly, you can create. We'll set them to drop from a very large number of drop sources. So we'll look at the first one here. So Novice's Pamphlet. This is basically the XP item. So when the player consumes this, they get an XP amount. So generally, if you want to create your own custom items, what I'd recommend doing is copy an existing template. So for example, Novice's Pamphlet, we want to create another XP item. So we're just going to paste that in there, and we'll call this one, I don't know, research notes, which is what we used to be called back in the old version. So we can say, display name, we'll call it researchers notes, XP variation, say 100 to 500. This is just the title. The actual meaningful values are here. So we can set our own skin ID. So if you want to create your own custom icons, you can do that and then just set the value there. The drop weight is basically when you're adding it to a loot table, how likely is it to drop? Obviously, at an individual level, there's also drop weights in the loot table themselves. The effects, you've got minimum and maximum. So what we want to do is we want to match what's written up here. So 100 XP at the minimum and 500 XP at the maximum. And then the type is XP injection. So that's the name of the category. So that, obviously we want to keep that the same. So then that's pretty much ready to go. So that would now be, we could spawn that with the command in game, or we could obviously add that to our loot tables below, which I'll show you shortly. So moving on to some other ones besides XP injection, we've got SP injection. Functionally it works the same way. It's effectively just minimum and maximum. So if you want it to always drop 2, you can set the minimum and maximum value to the same number, and it will always be that number. Otherwise, if you want that randomization chance, you can have a lower min and a higher max to have a roll somewhere in between. Getting into XP boost is where it kind of gets a little more complicated. So we have the effects here, and the effects are different because of the type. So we can see minimum and maximum value. This is basically a decimal place for percentages. 1.0 represents 100%, 0.5 represents 50%. So we can see here that our geologist flask, which is plus 50 to 100%, gives us gives us a 50 to 100% chance of dropping. Let's have a look here. Yep, so duration. Duration is how long the buff lasts for, and this is in seconds. Biomes is specific types of biomes that you can add this to. If you need an example of biomes, I'll show you one a little bit further down. But this is there's a little bit more than just simply writing in a biome name here, which I'll show you shortly. Time range is exactly the same. I'll show you a little bit further down how to do that. Source. This is basically what's referenced in skill tree, and I'll try to get a list of sources on the sales page so you guys know what to reference and what you can add. But effectively, this is the sources that you get from skill tree. And the XP and the type is the XP boost. So if we have a look further down, and we look at some obviously ones that have time range. So for example, here time range is not null here. This one here, it's null, which means there's no set time. This will just work 24/7. This one here, however, will only work from 8 PM till 6 AM. If you wanted to make this a daytime buff, for instance, you could do something like this from 6 AM until 18 PM, or till 6 PM, or 18 in 24-hour time. So you could sort of mix and match that around. You can also do biomes. Biomes, for example, is how the structure of biome. Biomes is a list. So we can see we've got Arctic. We could have temperate, whatever the other, but jungle, that sort of stuff. So there's different types of biomes that you can add in here. And I'll put a list of biomes in the sales page as well, so you guys can reference what's possible to add. But you could go so far as to have Arctic and biomes and time range. So you just copy paste the time range here, and we've now got something that only works in the Arctic during the daytime. So you can play around with it. I mean, there's a lot you can do for the XP boosts. But let's move on down to probably my favorite part of this plugin, which is the temporary buffs. So basically what temporary buffs are is, like I said in the previous segment, it's access to the ability, so it's the ability to access and provide players with skill tree unlocks without actually having to unlock the node. So for example, the instant chop buff on here, if I actually unlock that, so it's the tree hit farm, where is it? Let me show you Deep Sea Looter. So for example, if I add Deep Sea Looter, if I consume that, go into here, and you can see I've now got Deep Sea Looter plus 4%. If I go into underwater and look for the Deep Sea Looter perk and unlock it, you can see I've got plus 10% from my actual buff, and then it actually segments it into plus 4% as a temporary buff, which is represented by the purple writing. So that's how that kind of stacks and works. Some buffs, obviously, things like that are IO buffs, doesn't matter what value you put into here, they're just going to turn on and off, depending on whether they exist or not. But things like instant chop, which are percentage based, you can add a minimum or a maximum amount of percentage that the temporary buff will give. You can have it roll a random range by setting the min lower than the higher, so lower than the max, or you can make it so it's always the same amount by setting the minimum max to the same value. Allowing override is basically if you want this buff to always override, to override the other buffs of the same type that exists on the player already. So if they've consumed an instant chop item, this allow override will allow them to override that instant chop buff with this one instead. You've also got things like obviously fortune cookie. You can see here it's mining luck. We use the mining luck buff. It adds these values on here. It's obviously a temporary buff, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, you can make any number of these. They stack pretty well with the skill tree buffs themselves. So you can be really quite creative with the rewards that you give players. Obviously, if the player has already got the rating ultimate unlocked and they consume the rating ultimate buff, it's not really going to do much for them because they've already unlocked it, so it's not going to give them an extra cooldown. How often should timers update when the buff menu is open? So this one here is obviously when the buff menu here is open. How often do these timers update? So you'll see here by default it's every 5 seconds. So that's that. The menu position, this is by default what the value is, but obviously we can use that move icon to adjust that position, and that adjusts the position for every player. It's not just an individual person. It's an admin command required to run that. Now the loot profiles. So loot profiles, if you've ever used item perks, legendary items, this is effectively the same sort of setup. What this allows you to do is it allows you to nominate the loot source, but also really refine where they drop from based on either a short name, a boss profile, an event name, an NPC name if you're using things like NPC plugins or better NPC. You can also have like a list of required skin IDs. For example, if you only want it to drop from a specific chest that has a specific skin ID, you can list those skin IDs in there, and this item will only be added to that chest or that container if that skin ID matches. You can add identifiers to exclude from a consideration. So for example, if there's types of chests that you don't want this particular item to be added to, you can add, you know, any types of any identifiers in here, like so drop chance is basically what the likelihood of this item of this particular loot source rolling a drop. So for example, by default, wood cutting is simply when a tree is cut down. So when we finish cutting down a tree, there is a 0.5% chance that we're going to roll one of these items under here, and we can have any number of items under here with their own individual drop weights. So for example, if I wanted to add a few more items, I could do this. Just copy a few up here just to be a little bit lazy. So for example, if I wanted to set it so Lumberjack's Haste was the most likely item to be dropped, I could set it something like this. So what would happen in this particular scenario is, think of this like a giant wheel, and each of these numbers represent a piece of that pie, or that wheel. So this one here is 1,000, which means it's going to roll a number between 1 and 1,300, because we add these four numbers together. So it's going to roll a number between 1 and 1,300. If it's from 0 to 1,000, it's going to provide us with this as our selected item. If it's 1,001 to 1,100, it's going to be this. If it's 1,101 to 1,200, it's going to be this. And if it's 1,201 to 1,300, it's going to be this. So that's kind of how that works. So I'll list all the loot sources on here so you guys can get an understanding of, you know, what options are available. But there's a lot. There's mining, fishing, there's barrels, crates, and you can differentiate the crates by specifying their short names as well. So you can see we've got crate normal, we've got crate 2, crate tools, crate elite. We've got boss monster support added on here as well. We've got obviously more crates, but there's actually things like events and whatnot as well. So, you know, cargo and everything else will be, not cargo, sorry, a lot of convoy and that sort of stuff will be added on here as well. So you can run those events and get the loot. But yeah, you can create any number of loot sources. You can have overlapping loot sources, so you can have the same crate, same short names, and everything else, but different blacklists. For example, as an example, if there's a particular item that you want to be able to drop from both the crate code lock, but this particular item, so let's just say for example you want I don't know, cognitive cocktail. We want cognitive cocktail to have a chance of dropping from the crate if this particular skin ID isn't present. Sorry, this particular skin ID isn't present on the container. So if this container, if this container is present, so this icon is, if this skin ID is attached to the crate that the player loots, it's going to roll this loot source. If it's not, it's going to roll this loot source. So it's an example of how you can be quite granular with your setup. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy. Any feedback, any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy.